Episode 8.
The Lamb is ruling in me. Yet along comes another iteration of this beast. The dragon, my human identity, my subconscious mind. There is a sort of third beast, in talking, moving, graphic, form.
Book 17. Revelation chapters 12 and 13.
The woman, her progeny, the dragon, and the beasts.
I have to remind myself, the Lamb is ruling in me.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 8. All those who live on the earth will worship the beast. That is, all whose names haven't been written since the foundation of the world in the scroll, the book of life of the Lamb who was killed.
What has been catching my attention most successfully during this season is all this beastly trouble. But then, what I've learned along the way emerges from the depths of my mind. As I begin to remember that I am redeemed, I am washed by Christ, the Lamb who was slain.
Revelation 7, verse 14. These are the ones who have come out of great trouble. They have washed their robes, and made them white, in the blood of the Lamb. Romans 5, verses 3 and 4. Trouble produces endurance, which produces character that's been tried and tested.
I'm going to have to dig deep.
Hebrews 3, verse 6. We are of God's house, if in fact we hold firmly to our confidence and hope. Verse 14. We have become partners with Christ, if in fact we hold our initial confidence firm until the end. Philippians 4, verse 7. The peace of God will guard your hearts and minds.
I need to practice somehow finding this place of peace in my mind, and focus on those heavenly, redeemed elements within me, that God has been having recorded, that He has been verifying as His offspring. That new creation in Christ. The breakthrough comes when I can differentiate the new in Christ from the old flesh earthly self-nature. Then I realize what these troubles are primarily targeting. What is set aside as holy in God's sight remains unspoiled. This beast only targets what it's able to access, what is of the earth, earthy. And as it turns out, that's what God has designated to be separated and removed.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 9. If anyone has an ear, let him hear.
That's what I'm alert to hear. These scriptures have more to say than is apparent on the surface. Most Christians are not attuned to venturing beyond the superficial, and simply regurgitate the predictable, end-times ideas they have gullibly plagiarized from others. Revelation is a book of uncovering truth about Christ at work, and should be read that way.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 10. If anyone is meant for captivity, into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed by the sword, then by the sword he must be killed.
It sounds a bit like some are predestined to have their names written in this book, and some are not. Although bear in mind that, if you have ears to hear, this refers to some parts of us. We've been told to keep our ears open, and we should notice that it's like some sort of cipher. This whole description of troubles is defined here in verses 9 and 10 as part of the difficulties we all have to endure.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 10. Here, in this place, is required steadfast endurance, perseverance and faith from the saints.
It's time we stopped looking for some tribulation that fits on an inventively assembled timeline, and realize it's the normal pressure and trouble that we are destined to go through.
Along comes yet another iteration of this beast.
There's the dragon. I'm likening it here throughout this saga of my recent adventures to the underlying core essence of my human fleshly self. There's the first beast. I'm demonstrating this beast to the world when I burst out in some sort of human behavior which doesn't originate from God, but rather reveals evidence of my flawed self. Now there's this second beast, which emerges from my old flesh self within.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. I saw another beast coming up from the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but was speaking like a dragon.
So even though it may perhaps exhibit some characteristics of a lamb, it's nevertheless rooted in the beast nature, speaking like a dragon.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 12. This second beast stands before the first beast, and uses the same power the first beast has.
It has generated a more spontaneous and noticeable manifestation of my flesh, the beast in me.
This second beast is the ultimate payload.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 12. This second beast makes the earth and those who inhabit it worship the first beast, the one whose lethal wound had been healed.
It's launched from the back of the previous layers, the dragon, and the first beast. What it's out to accomplish, its purpose and function, seems to be described as enhancing the effectiveness of the first beast, accentuating its impact. I can expect to have to deal with some definite action now.
Revelation chapter 13, verse 13. He performs momentous signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth, right in front of people.
The dragon, my overall human identity, and my subconscious mind.
Now, using my spiritual imagination, I notice a link between this imagery of Revelation chapter 13 and what Ezekiel was shown about the state of God's sanctuary in Ezekiel chapter 8. This is helpful when meditating on God's tabernacle He dwells in, and relating it to Christ in the human heart. This can be thought of as a symbol of my overall human identity, which some might even think of as my subconscious mind. When I spend time in spiritual meditation and imagination of the mystical things of Christ that Paul spoke of, he described them as mysteries. I think of it as my normal flawed human character and personality. So when I look in Ezekiel, this is what I see.
Ezekiel 8, verse 5. I notice that at the door of the inner gate, an image has become resident, causing God to be jealous.
There it is, an identifying image. This edifice makes a statement about what lies within. The prophet is being taken on this guided tour, shown what lies within. And what he's shown first is a structure at the entrance of what is supposed to be God's temple, His sanctuary here within the holy city. All these images speak of the dwelling place within the individual person, where the new creation in Christ is emerging. This is where God's offspring is becoming resident. This structure Ezekiel saw at the entrance is like a statue, an edifice signifying what's found within. And as Ezekiel is being shown, what is within is not pleasing to God. It's not compatible with this tabernacle of God's. But wait, Ezekiel is told, verse 6 etc. You will see things more hateful than these. He has yet to even enter and see the rest of what this dragon symbolizes, and what the other images are like.
This dragon, called a serpent, is also referred to as Satan.
A comment is made in Revelation that this dragon is another term for Satan, the devil. Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, and 20, verse 2. Perhaps a scribe notated John's words, in an attempt to illuminate us. Nevertheless, it brings to mind how Jesus used the word for the devil, or Satan, several times to refer, not to some sort of angelic being, but rather to the nature that is in human beings. Jesus referred to Peter as Satan. He spoke to Peter, and addressed him personally as Satan. Mark 8, verse 33. Jesus spoke to his disciples and said, "One of you is the devil." John chapter 6, verse 70. Jesus described the devil as the father of what is in the heart. John chapter 8, verses 41 to 44. You are doing the deeds of your father. You are of your father the devil. I find it useful to separate the word Satan from the tired old hackneyed mental image normally used. The force of what is called Satan is an internal compulsion to either dabble in what is unclean, and is not right in God's eyes, or to go further and indulge shamelessly.
The beast.
If I am walking in Ezekiel's shoes here, on this guided tour of the tabernacle, I now start seeing various characteristics of the beast as I enter.
Ezekiel 8, verse 10. I saw a whole constructed arrays of things creeping, branching out. I saw every kind of unclean wild beast, and images inside the house of Israel, being engraved on the wall round about.
Such an untidy mess of uncleanness is cluttering and spoiling inside me. I see a beast, described as corrupted. Idols, and statues, and carvings, representing all the distractions I allow my mind to pursue, are squatting, as it were, like illegal inhabitants, inside what is supposed to be God's temple. I have been allowing some of my old memories that were engraved on the walls of my mind, to be polished by means of frequent visitation, and attention in my thoughts. They're being encouraged to revive, when they should be allowed to fade, and be covered by time's necessary dust, and memory's overgrowth. I'm responding with fear to old traumas in my scarred mind, which are usually more irrational and exaggerated than they are real. They aren't necessarily of any significance, but are simply given substance out of habit, even though it was a long time ago that they were etched into my mind. Most of those old engraved memories are probably only tattered remnants, no longer accurately recalled, but nevertheless they're still capable of triggering at least emotional fear, at worst psychotic unease.
The second beast.
Throughout Ezekiel chapter 8, we're being shown the nature of what is inside the human mind and thoughts. And we have it explained to us that what we've become aware of so far isn't all there is. There's more at deeper levels that needs recognizing and dealing with.
Ezekiel 8, verses 6, 13, and 15. You will see things even more hateful than these.
So now we come to this next deeper layer, which mentions the imagination.
Ezekiel 8, verse 12. Have you seen what they produce in the dark? Every man in the innermost chambers of his imagination?
My imagination can produce such wonders and craft such admirable aspirations. But when given over to dark imagery, it can become the most dangerous of all. This is where a person dares to toy with their fantasies, without realizing the extent of the negative artifacts that are accumulating as a result. Will the result of the dark imagery be anger? Even retaliation? Or worse still, is this where we can find the origins of abusive anger and violence all of us are capable of at some level?
Ezekiel 8, verse 12. For they think, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has abandoned the land.
Am I justifying my hateful imaginings because I delude myself into thinking God's not getting involved? I can understand those sentiments of not caring because of feeling abandoned by a God whom I don't perceive as loving or just. Furthermore, unbridled imaginations and fantasies can easily lead to feeling disenfranchised from society.
The Lord has abandoned the land.
At one end of the spectrum, this is evidenced worldwide by all sorts of social disorder and anarchy. It doesn't take much for a good old riot to break out to let off steam. This is the bad news. And yet God's people can still find themselves unexpectedly entangled in those very feelings and attitudes. At the other end of the spectrum is the good news, where Christ wants to be setting me free from imaginings which aren't compatible with His kingdom. When these fantasies aren't thought of as having any real consequences, they're unwisely given permission to grow and mutate. What's more, when this beast is allowed unchecked access to the resources of my dragon nature, and my mind's beast nature, all that hateful and unclean imagery that I've allowed to grow is exaggerated.
Revelation 13, verse 13. He performs momentous signs and events, even making fire come down.
Now there is a sort of third beast, a talking, moving, image.
Revelation chapter 13, verses 14 and 15. And by the signs he was permitted to perform on behalf of the first beast, he deceives those living on the earth. The second beast tells those who live on the earth to make an image of the first beast, who had been wounded by the sword, but still lived. The second beast was empowered to give life to the image of the first beast, so that it could speak.
A visual likeness is made, one which looks alive,
Gives life to the image.
and sounds alive.
It could speak.
I'm tempted to think of this being a bit like modern TV. Having the power of persuasion via the media, through slick video and audio presentations. One of the predominant characteristics of living in the 21st century is all the imagery, video and noise, and a lot of it is even called reality TV, when there's actually nothing genuine, and down-to-earth, or real about it. However, John was still only describing here in these allegories, the conflict involved in Christ's kingdom growing in strength, till it overcomes the sinful old flesh self. And everything here is consistent with Daniel's similar version of events, in which Christ becomes the king ruling inside us.
Daniel 7, verse 18. The saints of the Most High take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, to the age of the ages.
We're easily exposed to distorted political ideology.
So as I've pointed out, what I see here as most important, is the good news of Christ's kingdom, growing in my inner man, which is what the Apostle Paul encouraged us towards.
Ephesians 3, verse 16 to 19. I pray that according to the wealth of his glory, he will grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit, in the inner man, that Christ will dwell in your hearts through faith, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you will be filled up to all the fullness of God.
However, not everyone pursues spiritual things with such a mystical bent. So in order to avoid being politically naive and gullible, I'll explore for a moment the politics and conspiracies I think I'm getting a sniff of in Revelation chapter 13.
Typically when some fascist political ideology sneaks in, we see through it. It gets exposed. Like having one of its heads killed, chapter 13, verse 3. But of course, against all odds, the system inexplicably recovers, and continues. It's been exposed for what it is, yet the gullible populace will forget history, and still fall for the renewed propaganda. Chapter 13, verse 14. He deceives those living on the earth. Even so, it does remind me how media is distorted by authorities, so that information that should rightfully be alerting us to distorted political ideologies becomes subverted and rendered ineffective. In recent years, that has been achieved with a single word: disinformation. This word is like an edifice, an idol that has become an institution, and this image instills fear of transgressing standards that society supposedly expects, and has become reinforced by the use of the inaccurate phrase, "follow the science." The science has frequently become actual disinformation, and has become widely perceived as having some sort of official importance, when media corporations bow to the beast and create a favorable media image in trusted news outlets. As I took time to reflect on why seemingly intelligent professionals would find appeal in this sort of state control mechanism, I recalled how I've observed supposed thinkers reading into the TV cameras with a gaunt appearance devoid of genuineness, as they parrot words pertaining to the science. No doubt if I were one of them, I too would hesitate before endangering my decent salary and the associated celebrity status. I started to scan these scriptures for evidence of this pecuniary compulsion. Can I be pressured financially? I didn't have to look far. Chapter 13, verse 17 describes the financial consequences of not conforming. The second half of Revelation chapter 18 similarly laments that there is a huge cost as we see this wicked city overwhelmed by Christ's rule. But of course it's that wicked city, our human flesh, that loses. Am I willing to pay the price? Social media should have helped throughout these years of arguing over disinformation by providing independent thought. But because of the profit structure of these social media platforms, they must bow to the algorithms of the corporations to censor uploads of opinions in obeisance to this beast. The ruling authority of these corporations, who have engineered nothing less than economic piracy, became apparent early in the 20th century, and broke into full stride from the 1970s and 80s. Now this piracy is the neo-normal system of profit and dividends, a giant idol adored and bowed to worldwide. This actually sounds very much like the authority that the beasts and the woman lay claim to.
Revelation 17, verse 18. As for the woman you saw, she is the great city that has sovereignty over the kings of the earth.
Everything from fears of environmental calamities, to gender issues, what has become labeled as inclusiveness, etc. These have become meaningless political issues, wielded brutally and irrationally by that media.
My pursuit of pleasing God is beset by struggles.
Those distorted political ideologies, however, are not where my struggle lies. No, it's these antagonists, these beasts that are my old flesh self. They're vying to ensure that my journey through life, in the pursuit of pleasing God, is fraught with various struggles. The real issue is, how well am I doing at overcoming them? That dragon. Hopefully I've become more aware of the failings of my fundamentally flawed character, so I should be learning to make better judgment calls when I need to. That first beast. And let's say this beast rears its head when some sudden inopportune circumstances arise. But because I've been growing in Christ, my reactions display some positive and useful result. Then the second beast. And in the aftermath of the drama, let's say that I've managed my flaring imagination, so that it doesn't lead to further contention. Beyond this, I have yet to face a third beast.